Hey, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Captive Audience. This is Don Anderson with his favorite co-host, Don Anderson. Oh, I mean Leslie Snyder. We forgot to change the name. I suspect that
Did
you
I?
won't be able to tell the difference. Hello, everybody. What say you today, Leslie?
Oh my gosh. It's been a big
Welcome
day.
to
It's been
another
a big week.
Captive.
Yeah.
Oh
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
it's always a big week. It's like for those of you old enough to remember, it's like Ed Sullivan used to say, it's going to be a really big show, right? Well, I thought I'd kick this off with it's probably a little older than you, but you know who he is. So I thought I'd kick this off with a little bit of a riff on the Iran war, and then we'll get into all the other things too. But this has been a top of mind one, of course, with what's going on. So I thought I'd kind of lead with that. So here goes. So bottom line, all you hear about, well, one thing we have to remember is that this is a civilizational threat. We have to remember this is of doing this in the first place. If these religious fanatics get a hold of nuclear weapons, it's game over for everyone. And to have them in a location as strategic as basically right next to the Strait of Hormuz, the Malacca Straits, the entire Arab world, something like 30 or 40% of the world's energy flows through those straits. Some huge percentage of the world's products, just commerce flows through those straits. It would be insane. In addition, it'd be only a matter of time before they're launching those missiles across the ocean and taking out American cities. So I hear these questions from reporters all the time, and it's like everybody forgets this. They're mired in short-term stuff like, are we going to try nation building, or are we going to need boots on the ground? We don't want to get stuck in a quagmire. All those things are important. But at the end of the day, the singular event, the singular most important thing that has to happen is those guys cannot get nukes. These other things are secondary to that. So, yeah, obviously, we want to do this in a way that we don't wind up with boots on the ground. We obviously don't want to do this thing in a fashion that we're stuck in a quagmire. For heaven's sake, there's one thing we learned over the last 30 or 40 years. We don't want to get involved in nation building. But let me step back from the nation building thing for a minute, because I think this is really interesting. I'm going to stop after I talk about this for a minute. Everybody talks about nation building doesn't work. That's not true. It's not universally true. Actually, nation building does work under very specific, narrow circumstances. We rebuilt Germany after World War II, and it became a massive success, like fourth biggest economy in the world. We built Japan after World War II. That worked. Massive success after World War II. What do those two countries have in common? They weren't Islam. That's why it worked. So what we've learned is you can't nation build in Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Iran, all those places. Why? Because they're Muslim countries, and that religion is not compatible with democratic principles. It's only compatible with theocratic principles. That's why you cannot nation build in that part of the world. The first and primary goal is to keep them from getting nukes. The nation building part is going to be up to them. Now, I know it sounds brutal, like we don't care about the people of Iran. We do care about them. But here's the thing, beyond overthrowing their current destructive regime, which, by the way, just wiped out 60,000 of their own citizens. So getting rid of their regime is a good thing, but we can't help them beyond that because we don't know how to help them beyond that. That's like, hey, if I had a person who was having a heart attack and needed the cardiovascular surgery, I want to help them, but you know what? I don't know how to help them. You know, besides beating on the chest a few times, if that doesn't help them, there's nothing I can do. And that's pretty much the situation we face in the Middle East. Is we got to protect ourselves from them first and help them to the degree that we can, but we can't build their government for them because we don't know how to do it. And we've certainly figured that out over the last 50 or 60 years. We don't know how to do it in a non-Western country. We can do it in Germany, you can do it in Japan, you do it in South Korea, but you ain't doing it in the Middle East. So I'll stop there. And your thoughts,
Well, I think part of the difference too is that, we had a world war and these two countries were devastated and they just really had no choice. In the Middle East, it's been an ongoing engagement, so it's been and I just it's a lot pricklier than these other situations. I mean, they also in after World War II, there was a worldwide consensus that Germany and Japan was going to behave in certain ways, but the world is divided, And, we went into Iran and we went into Iraq and we went into Afghanistan. And I mean, we created a lot of chaos. And I don't think we did necessarily our enough research before we went in. We went in under false pretenses and found out that, shoot, maybe we shouldn't have been there in the first place. I don't know. I think one of the biggest tells is going to be, does the country start getting behind the reorg? Like you said, I agree with you. We should not be in the nation building business. Our job should be remove the threat and then step away. And I don't think that we have an obligation to put things back together. I mean, maybe in a way, somebody could say, well, gosh, we really should be part of putting things back together so that it goes the way that we want it to be. But I don't know that that's necessarily the case. I think all that does is it prolongs things. It provides more opportunity for corruption, for for political, positioning. And I just think we need to quickly, if we reframe this as let's remove the threat to the United States and then we get out, then I almost think that that's kind of like a scarier proposition for the enemy. There's plenty of people on the other side that are going to benefit in Iran from destruction and then rebuilding, right? There's plenty of people that are going to profit from that. Well, if instead we take out that second level, that second phase, and we just say, look, you're a threat to us. That threat has to go. There's a couple ways we can go about it. You can remove it or we will, but then bye. If you're the bully in the playground and we punch you in the nose, I'm not going to pull you back up and take you to the ER. You're going to have to figure it out and, find some of your bully friends to take you to the hospital or whatever else happens. I don't know. I've just becoming more and more disinterested in the rest of the world's problems. I just want to take care of our problems.
And
What do you think about?
And that's where the normal American, the typical American is. The problem is, it is our problem, because if they start throwing nukes over here, it's going to be our problem in a hurry. And the thing is, that seems like a very distant event because things are quiet and calm here, and we don't have those things flying over our heads. But if we don't do anything, I'd love to go isolationist. Trust me, I would. And two oceans were great protection for the first, 150 years of the country's existence, maybe the first 200 years. But technology has made the world a lot smaller. And we found that out the hard way on 9/11. So we can't walk away from it. But that doesn't mean we need to have boots on the ground if we were like running the country. We do not want that. The other problem with that is people start to resent that. They see you as an occupier. No matter how well it's run or no matter how much better it is, anything that goes sideways will be blamed on the occupying country. So you want out. They can rule their own thing. So from our perspective, people, how do you define success? To me, success is they don't have nukes. Beyond that, we can hope for the best. I mean, I know they love to establish a ruling elite, something like the old Pahlavi family that was there back before the Ayatollah in '79. But that may be too difficult to do. Maybe the best we can hope for is that every 40 years we're going to go in there and clean it up. I hope not. I understand what he's going to do. But the cost may be too high. That we may need to wait and see. And I'll add one last thing, and then I'll give you a chance to reply to all of that. One thing that has changed in the last 45 or 50 years, not to let Jimmy Carter off the hook with that disaster, back in 78, 79, was that we didn't have the technology then to do that we do now. We didn't have the ability to do a precision strike. The technology didn't allow you to go in and figure out who the 40 leaders are and take them all out. You couldn't have done that 45 or 50 years ago. And if you go back to World War II, a lot of people had a whole lot of complaining about the firebombing of Dresden or the firebombing of Tokyo. But before they did that, and those are some of the worst events in history that don't get much play because everybody focuses on what Hitler did to the Jews, for example. And nobody focuses on 100,000 people in Tokyo getting burned to death or 40,000 roasted in Dresden. They forget about that because at first they tried the bombing and only hit where the munitions were made. But the bombers, we didn't have the technology to do it. So they would fly low and we would lose entire bombing crews trying to do that. Then they tried to fly high and they weren't hitting anything. So the solution was, well, we just have to take out the whole city. Now, we can argue about the morality of that, but it did help to make the war shorter, but it cost a lot of civilian lives in the process. But now you can make a strategic strike. Like, look at what we're doing. I think so far we've only lost like what 5 or 6 troops. Now, every lost life is a bad thing, but what country in the world could do something like this and have only 5 or 6 people killed? That's incredible. And that's because we now have technology we didn't have 50 years ago. So that's one huge thing that's changed in the last 40 or 50 years. So let me stop.
I mean, yeah,
Thoughts on that?
no, I mean, you're absolutely right that the technology is in a better place. It's not one-sided though, I mean, there's, right, we've got, I mean, how many Iranian, sleeper cells do we have over here? How many, friends of Iran are going to show up and start, targeting our schools or our airport, all of our soft spots, and creating chaos over here. So, again, I think it's, yay, America. I'm glad that we came out strong, and I'm glad that we're able to, take out, a ruler and, a group of leaders that have been horrific homicidal maniacs. Great. But I don't, I have a, I just don't like it. I know that it's going to come back on us. And I don't think, I think the average American is feeling how I'm feeling, that yes, of course we want bad guys to go away. We want threats to America to go away, but we're exhausted at the idea of all the money and the bloodshed and the lives destroyed, with depression. And I mean, we still have, how many veterans are, committing suicide a day now, right? We're just going to add to that mix. So that's just all the stuff that has to be added to the calculation. And I think regular people are thinking about that. I'm certainly thinking about that. I mean, I'm as staunchly conservative as they get, but I'm fearful and I'm exhausted. So I hope it turns out. I hope we get everything we want.
Well,
but I think there's going to be some unexpected pain and suffering that, maybe the politicians don't care about, or they're not talking about, because their kids aren't going to war.
Well, I would say that, yes, all of that's true. And I can relate to all of that. But at the end of the day, we can do nothing, and we can let them 20 years from now take out an American city.
Yeah.
I think we have a delay.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. I don't know if you heard. Yeah. All I said was, we don't have I don't think we have a choice. It's, yeah, there's going to be costs for doing something versus what are the costs of doing nothing. I think the costs of doing nothing are far higher than doing something. It's kind of like having a leaky, like a roof, not dealing with your roof.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nobody wants to do it. Pain in the neck. There's nothing sexy or glorious about, having to replace your roof. If you don't, then years down the road, your roof's caving in and out. It really costs you a fortune. I think that's analogous to what we're dealing with here. So all you can do is do it in that minimizes damage to the degree that you possibly can. And that's what we're doing. It's pretty miraculous what's been done so far. And hopefully, like you said, hopefully they don't see any of those other but those other blowbacks are always possible. I'm quite frankly amazed we haven't had somebody go in and blow up a shopping mall or something. I mean, not with your basic, just go with a semi-automatic and just shoot the place up. We're a country full of soft targets. It's pretty incredible that thing hasn't happened to date, and it doesn't have to be Middle Easterners doing that. If you get my drift.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, what's the latest on that Texas? What's the latest on that Texas? I am not super dialed into it, but they were talking about that Texas massacre, and I thought the last time I read anything about it, they were tying it to Iranians.
Yeah, I gotta say, all I know is it happened, and I haven't followed it or seen any follow-up since.
Okay. Yeah. Well,
Uh,
that's just how it goes. But speaking of war, do you want to dive into that article that I was talking to you about FitBod?
yes, you mean yes, definitely.
So
FitBods.
yeah.
Was that? Go ahead.
Well, there's a gal who I follow. Her name's Jenna McCarthy, not Jenny McCarthy, but Jenna McCarthy, and she's always so funny, but super, yeah,
Right.
she's funny, but right on the edge of current events. Apparently, there was an article. Huffington Post wrote an article in response to Hegseth and RFK Jr. Going out there and talking about eating real food, and Hegseth, had a video where he's like doing his exercises, and now the Huffington. So we've got these 60, 70-year-old men who are in shape, right? Looking good, exercising. And the Huffington Post and, all these like super libs are not happy about it. And what their experts have decided is that publicly displaying physical prowess is little more than a thinly veiled white nationalism, toxic masculinity, and possibly the dumbbell wielding downfall of civilization. So here, libs have been celebrating be fat, be unhealthy, be a man dressed up like a woman. That's all cool, right? A man bun and a beard, super cool. That's a good decision. That's good for your body. But as soon as you're fit and muscular, you're the problem. It's just, yeah, it's so far beyond. It's so far beyond. But yeah, and so they were comparing, the fitness routines to like the KKK
Yeah.
and like the little soldiers and doing anyway, whatever. I don't even know why we're talking about it as long as we have, other than it's just a comedy routine. You just can't, anything normal and good, they're going to turn it into something bad.
Mhm.
Like what was all that talk after the Olympics about who was it who was talking about how, if you're proud, like if you have this compulsion to be proud of your country because of the
Mhm.
achievements that we had at the Olympics, that's actually that is to be avoided. It's like Stockholm syndrome. It's like falling in love with your abuser, and inviting your abusive ex-husband back into the mix. It's the same thing, because our country is so horrible and we should all feel brainwashed and guilt ridden because we're proud of our country.
You know, you know what all of this is? It's the result of too much college. I swear to you, if you went and talked to every one of the people that said that, I guarantee you they have at least a 4-year degree and probably a PhD or something, right? Because
Yeah,
that's where they
I would
teach
say
you insanity. They teach insanity. Vast majority of people are proud of the country. They look at the media, and you would think that everybody hated the country. They're teaching that stuff. I mean, who could believe this? It's not even rational.
no, it's the person who has nothing of substance to provide to the conversation or the organization. It's the person that whenever something's not working, they point to some other problem, right? It's the person that just likes to stir the pot, who likes to have the drama, because they themselves are not a solution provider. They don't add any real value. So instead, what they do is point out the problems. And we've all worked with those people. We've all known those people, right? And you're like, okay, what's the problem today? What are you not responsible for when, I mean, yeah, it's sad, but I mean, that's what we've come to expect, I guess.
Well, I think it's part of the human condition, and we all have this. It's part of, I guess, the original sin complex, right? Is we want to look to everything else for the problem and not us. The most difficult thing in the world is look in the mirror and say, I played a role in that. I was mostly responsible for that. You might remember that very famous Happy Days episode. It's my favorite of all time. When Fonz had to admit that he was wrong, and remember, he couldn't say it. I was
Yes.
I was
Yeah.
and the Fonzarelli couldn't. He was wrong. It was the best episode ever. Well, Us human beings are like that. And the more mature, I want to go watch that episode again. Well, the hardest thing for any human being to do is admit to say I
Yeah.
was wrong and here's what I could, or at least I was a part of the problem. What can I do to fix myself so that I can make it less of the problem? And the least mature among us, the least civilized among us, the least virtuous among us can't do that. And that's who these people are.
Yeah. I mean, I've got nothing to add. You are right, Don. You are
Just reading
right.
Lori's. Yeah, I was just reading Lori's comment here. What her dad said: if you can't dazzle them with brilliance, dazzle them with BS.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
A lot of
Confuse them with
in that.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. That's funny. Well,
I thought this would be a good time to hop into that topic that you had talked with me about earlier about the
okay.
fraud. You want to watch into that?
Sure. So, I mean, I know that obviously, fraud is being discovered everywhere, and I cannot wait for California to. I can't wait for Gavin to be let off and let out in handcuffs. But while we're all focusing on these big, state issues and national issues, the last 2 days I've been working with an old friend of mine. I've known her for about a decade, and she used to be a real high-powered realtor, um, and just funny, smart, just beautiful, all the good stuff. And she has had a series of strokes. She's had 5 strokes. She's had a couple heart attacks. She suffered from Lyme disease
Wow.
for a couple of years, cured herself of that. But her body has just become frail, and she's disabled, physically, mentally. She's had brain damage from the strokes, and so the last 2 days I've spent at her house trying to help her kind of work through the system, work through getting connected. She's got her food stamps, but she's got Social Security, but she's got $30 a month in food stamps. That's all CalFresh will pay her. Like, that is less than I pay on a bag of kibble for my cats for the month. And
Yeah, I
that's
was
what
like, 30
she, as
bucks
a
is
human,
not cutting it.
$30 a month. I mean, it's absurd. And trying to get her just all connected to all these services that she needs. And she's just talking to legal aid, and I'm gonna keep doing this, and I'm gonna keep helping her until we get it all figured out. But as I'm looking at the spreadsheet of what she has and what her life costs, and there's just very, very little spread. And then I see the kind of benefits
Mhm.
that she's off. Like I said, $30 in food stamps. She's trying to get a bus pass, and she had to wait a month before they would make a decision. She's not even going to get a decision on whether she can get her bus pass until like the end of the month. I think the 20th of the month. Um, she's trying to get in-home health care because her house is a wreck, and she needs somebody to take her to the grocery store, and she needs somebody to make sure she showers. And here it is at a very, very personal, one roof perspective. And I see how hard it is for an honest person who's worked and produced and contributed to get something out of the system. And it infuriates me when I now am, of course, feeling this, at a more personal level, that these other people that have got the whole system figured out. In fact, I was, I'll tell the story again, but I was talking to a friend of mine who is in this arena. She helps seniors get connected to services, and she was describing a situation where one of their nurses went into a home where where they are receiving an in-home care person's attention for like 20, 30 hours a week. And so the nurse went in, just checked the meds, do the vitals, wanted to talk to the person. Well, it turns out, and this person's getting paid. This person gets paid, it's like 20, 25 bucks an
Mhm.
hour to provide this in-home care. And the person actually wasn't there. The person had set up cameras. And so they're just monitoring from an off-site the condition or the mental and physical condition and the safety and whatever. I don't know if they like on a microphone, like take your meds. I mean, I'm not sure take a shower, don't eat that. I don't know what you do over the camera in order to be able to like properly manage. But I just am thinking, how sad is this? That there's so much room for fraud, and honest people just get left out. They just get left out.
Yeah. Well, the lack of integrity in this system is absolutely mind-boggling. Even, for example, gosh, in Minnesota, from these programs, what was the one in New York State? 124 billion in Medicaid fraud in New York State. And here were some stats that I thought were so interesting. New York's average Medicaid spending per beneficiary is $12,500. That's 36% higher than the national average for state spending, and 80% higher per resident than anywhere else in the country. I mean, you think about that for a minute. 6.8 million New Yorkers are now on Medicaid, and that's 34% of the state's population. 1 in 3 people are on Medicaid. Are you kidding me? They spent $72 billion on personal care and home aid services between 2018 and 2024. I mean, that's basically what you're talking about here. That's about half their Medicaid spending just for personal care home aids. Something is rotten in Denmark. They have 623,000 home aids in New York alone now. And that outnumbers retail workers by 3 to 1. Now, that's just in that time period. So I don't understand that system, but I understand enough to know that things don't grow that fast and get that big in that short a period of time. Discovery, and since this isn't technology, it's not that, or massive fraud. And we all know California is what the most populous state, or it was. It may not be at the current rate, but you know it's working.
Yeah. I am. No, it is not that, people are actually legitimately needed.
Yeah, we got a little.
We've got some lag. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. We had lost a connection for a minute there. So anyway, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. 1 in 3 New Yorkers on Medicaid, 623,000 home aids in New York. I mean, honestly, people are standing there watching that happen. Those people need to be in jail. They need to be in jail.
No,
and in California, and in California, you don't have to prove. Not only do you not have to prove citizenship, but they have entire programs for non-citizens. And so, maybe if we weren't paying all those non-citizens, and that's what they're being open about, right? They're being open and honest about, you don't have to be a citizen. You don't have to have a social security number. It's okay. Well, if that's what we see, what don't we see? It's frustrating.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Newsom wants to give reparations,
and that's where it goes back to the morality. Immoral people.
Yeah.
Right. No, exactly. Yeah.
You okay, Don?
Just you can't make this stuff up. You cannot make this stuff up.
Are we good?
Let's see. I'm just trying to make sure this battery power on a computer was low, and you think you had all of these things taken care of before you start. then the cat comes in the room, and hey, it all goes a heck in a handbasket.
I
But
know.
no, the level of corruption, and I'm not sure what it's going to take for let's say the Oregon, Washington, California have to be, if not the three worst states, then they're certainly three of the five worst states. And
Yeah.
what happened? They become one party states. And I honestly think the only true solution to them is that they revert to being two party states again, which means, and this goes back to uh, the voter ID issues and the voter fraud. Because I truly don't believe, yes, they might be left leaning states, but I don't think they're crazy states. I don't think the general population is progressive. They might be a little bit on the liberal side, but they're not America hating progressives, but they are ruled by America hating progressives. And the reason for that is because of massive voter fraud. So if that gets taken care of, and I do think there's going to be significant progress on that front in the next coming up in this next election here, I think we're going to see some really good changes for these states. But that has to happen.
Hope so. Did you see that? Did you see that clip that's been going around? I think it was like from last month, where Senator Kennedy was interviewing the Secretary of the Department of Energy, Chris Wright, and he's talking about he's asking him questions about and about spending, and
Mhm.
he says, "Are you telling me that 76 days before the end of Biden's term, before Trump took office, the government gave out $93 billion in loans to businesses that had not filed proper financial records. They didn't have a lot of the records. And there was no time to even vet these applications, but they handed them out. $93 billion. This is twice as much given out in the last 15 years. It was just a pillaging of our bank account.
Yeah. I think they saw who was in office and who was in office, and whoever, because it wasn't Joe. So whoever was running Joe, like just said, "Hey, Katie, bar the door," and they just like let it run, and they ran wild as long as they could.
Well,
Um,
they had to pay people off because they knew that that it was going to stop. So now, I mean, yeah, I haven't followed up on it to find out if there's been any, you know, invoices sent out to those businesses to get
yeah,
them, forcing collection notices. But
yeah.
there's always
And
things going on behind the scenes.
I think one of the things, and it's tough to be patient. We'd love to have retribution come down like, in a minute, and I get that, right? But it's easier to tear down than it is to build up. And we're building up. I mean, they did everything they could to destroy this country for 4 years straight. I mean, they had it for 4 years straight. It's pretty amazing it's still standing. It really speaks to the resiliency of the country to be able to have what we had happen to us for 4 years. It's hard to even believe. You can't even count all the stuff that they did, and somehow this thing withstood it. Now, I don't know how many more episodes like that we can take, but we need to do everything we can to pull the swing the pendulum back the other direction. And I'm feeling like this is I can't, if you'd have asked me 5 years ago if what we've seen in the last year is possible, I'd have said no way. And I
Yeah.
think we have to always reflect on that. Whatever uh, foibles we might have or whatever issues we might have with what we see, wow, compared to where we were overall, wow is the only word you can say. I mean, I was just thinking about the international scene for a second. You think about this for a minute. Uh, China's our number one, not just the number one industry. I think the one world government crowd in Europe is just as big an enemy as China. But let's just say for the sake for a country that exists is China. So look at what's been done to them just in the last as an enemy. So never think about these things in isolation. You have to like step back and then broaden your lens for a minute. So this takedown of Iran is just as much a takedown of China as it is Iran, because they were using Iran. That's where they got their oil. That's where they got their fuel. They're able to sell their weapons to Iran to use those against us and then make money on that, right? So this was just as much a takedown of China as it was Iran. The Maduro thing with Venezuela, that was just as much a takedown. That was to get China out of the Western Hemisphere. Same with what happened in Mexico with that drug lord that went down. That was a takedown against China, right? We tend to like focus on just a narrow thing, but remember, we're in asymmetrical war. We're not going to probably ever see kinetic wars again because in a kinetic war, if you have nuclear powers in a kinetic war, it's game over because they're both going to use nukes. It's going to be over. So we're not going to see a World War II type scenario where Germany, France, Great Britain, the United States, and Russia get after it. The next time that happens, we're going to be out of here because we're going to be fried, right? So what you're likely to see is asymmetrical, which have always happened, but amongst the great powers, it's the only kind of war that can happen is asymmetrical. So when you see a Maduro go down, you got to look at that. Great, that's a Venezuela thing, but it's much bigger than a Venezuela thing. Who was the proxy state for Venezuela? Well, it's China. China was using them as a proxy to fight the United States. Just like the United States used Afghanistan as a proxy to fight against Russia back in the 80s, just like Russia used Vietnam as a proxy state to fight against us back in the 60s. They have to start thinking in these terms if you're ever going to understand the international scene. So what's happened is we've kicked China out of the Western Hemisphere. This dude has done this in like 6 months. The general population doesn't really understand how huge that is. China's been shut down in like 6 months. Their weapons, they weaponized Venezuela and Russian weapons as well, and they didn't work at all. They went and snatched the guy out, the president of the country, out of there the day after Chinese emissaries were there. What a bodacious move is that? Without a single solitary loss of American life. And then you look at what's happened with the Middle East bombing that a few months. We've forgotten about that already. But those bunker busters doing that was an anti-China move as much as it was an anti-Iran move. So there's a lot of things being done to take down our biggest adversary with the least amount of loss of life as possible and restoring economic freedom to the rest of the world. It's been an amazing series of moves with so far, keep our fingers crossed, very low cost to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you're right.
So and somehow I tracked off of the fraud thing. That's back to the domestic stuff. But I think over time, more and more of this stuff is going to be because I know here was the other one. This was a big thing that happened the other day. So it was I can't remember if we talked about this or not, but it was there's been another giant media firm is buying CNN. Did you catch that?
Oh no, no.
Yeah. So this is also huge. I can't remember who it is, but remember, CNN and those other major networks have been bleeding money big time. Like the Washington Post having all these layoffs, they were losing money. And they're losing money because nobody trusts them anymore. Nobody trusts them anymore is because all they do is beat the progressive, bell. So remember, 75% of the population doesn't work for them. So they're just bleeding money. Well, you can't do that forever. So somebody's come along, I can't remember which big outfit it is, and they're buying them. And they're not going to buy them and let them just keep losing money. Otherwise, why buy them? So now they're all freaked out, and they should be, because a lot of these people are going to be out of a job. And those organizations are going to have to start reporting news like they used to. Now, I'm not saying they're going to go back, they're going to go and be, like we're doing here. But think of what CNN was like in, say, the late 80s, early 90s. It was actually good. I mean, you knew it was Christiane Amanpour, and she was slightly left. Okay, fine. But they weren't lying to your face, or Walter Cronkite or, Rather, almost said Blather, Rather, or any of those guys, right? It was watchable news.
Yeah.
Now, for what I'll call the regular Joe, who's not, so people that are on something like this, you represent the thinking class, right? So this stuff never makes any difference to you. But for the regular Joe, Joe Normal, we'll call him. Well, Joe Normal watches that stuff. Can you imagine if Joe Normal is seeing regular news, what that's going to do to the electorate in terms of voting?
Yeah. Yeah.
If Joe Normal wasn't having to put up with stuff like The View,
Right.
for example, just imagine the swing that would make. So this is a huge positive development heading into midterms on top of that.
Yeah, well, I'm interested in hearing more about the news purchase and who's gonna take it over, because I mean, obviously they're gonna want that place to make some money. I mean, there's gonna be some major changes. They're gonna actually have to start covering the news. Otherwise, people aren't interested. They can get it from everywhere else,
Yeah.
We don't need a traditional newspaper anymore because we're on Substack and we're on Twitter and we're, you know, we've got our different newsletters and different channels that we subscribe to. So
That's
they're going
pretty
to have
much
to do, they're now coming from behind. They're going to have to come up with something that's unique, that's a special offering, a special insight.
Mhm. Yeah. And hey, and media news is no different than any other product. You got to give people quality. If you give them, I almost said something naughty here. You give them something that's, how about bovine scatology, to use my favorite? If you give them bovine scatology for long enough, they'll like the taste of that. They'll stop eating it at some point. Now, some people have a longer run for eating bovine scatology before they get off of it. You know, me, mine is short. Some people eat that stuff for a long time. And I think people have finally figured out that that doesn't taste so good. I need something else. And people got lots of choices. One of the great things about this country is people like to have lots of choices. One of the reasons why General Motors hopped over Ford to be the number one automaker was Albert P. Sloan came along and said, "Hey, you know what? You want something other than the black Model T? I'll give you a Chevy. I'll give you a Plymouth. I'll give you like a Buick. I'll give you a Pontiac." We like that.
Yeah.
And so this is a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we'll see where it goes. We'll see where it goes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So there was an interesting Supreme Court ruling that I wanted to just bring up. The Supreme Court just voted 6-3, or ruled 6-3, that California's school policy of keeping secrets from parents about their children's transition, their children's, you know, sexual transitions, is unconstitutional. So California had this law that basically prevented is prevented the right word? They would intentionally not tell parents that children wanted to transition. And the teachers were required to rally around that and keep that secret from parents. Even if parents asked questions, the teachers were not allowed to share. Yeah. And so you had these kids who were having and on top of that, if the schools were actually emboldened and allowed to take kids to gender affirming doctors, they were allowed to take them to for procedures, right? I mean, we've known that, you know, they've encouraged abortions. They shield, you know, kids from parental knowledge about abortions. Well, then anyway, so that's what's been going on in California, and it's been disgusting, of course. And so Lamondre sued. Was like they did like a whole class action, you know, against the state of California, and then it was they appealed. The state of California appealed to the Supreme Court. So now this is actually upholding the original decision, which came down about a year ago, I guess, that Lamondre won. So this, anyway, I think it's a major win for parents. It's a major win for sanity. It's a major win for children and innocence, and, you know, First Amendment and family protections. I mean, it's just been so evil what's been going on in California, and I'm just so happy that this is now something that, I mean, they're still going to have to root it out. I know that in Encinitas, which is a town, you know, where I was on the school board in the South, where my kids went to school. I mean, they are rabid. They are rabid and they are radical. And they would, the superintendent and the head of instruction and pupil services, they would just badmouth and call names of parents if they didn't like that policy, and they would shut them down and shut them out. I mean, it was just ugly, and parents felt targeted and victimized. So
what could be more sacrosanct than your kids? You know, I mean, 30 or 40 years ago, I mean, I was thinking what my father-in-law, who was a police officer, would have done if somebody had done something like that. Let's just say that he'd probably still be serving time. I mean, that people would think that they could get away with doing that to people's kids is just unbelievable. And take a court case to reverse it. And here's the thing: you and I both know they're going to keep doing it as long as they can behind their back. I mean, you can pass all the laws you want. At the end of the day, those people have to be removed, or that system's got to be changed. And that's one of the reasons why I'm such a proponent of school choice, because the only thing that's going to fix this is competition. When people have the ability to take their kids somewhere else, most people who can have already done that. Hell, most public school teachers take their kids somewhere else. They know it's a rotten system. But for those who feel they can't or can't because of we all know the hurdles associated with doing that. They don't really have alternatives, and their tax money, they're forcing us to use our tax money to pay for something we don't want. I mean, can you imagine if General Motors came along and said, "Hey, buy my car, and if you don't, I'm going to take your tax money. I'll get your tax money whether you buy a Chevy or not," and then you pay them, and then you go buy something else, and now you're paying twice. That's essentially what we have with the public school system.
Of course, it's exactly what we have. That is exactly what we have. You're paying tuition twice.
Yeah, it is so, and paying for something that not only you don't like or you don't want, but something that is destructive to civilization. Because at the end of the day, if you destroy the family unit, that is how we transmit civilization. This constitutional republic can't work without civilized citizens.
Yeah.
Ultimately, at the top of the food chain, a lot of people, Don, you're just a conspiracy theorist. You're damn Skippy, I'm a conspiracy theorist because that's exactly what's going on. That's how you gut the country from within.
Oh yeah,
and that's what you're doing. So
we know it.
Yeah.
We know it. Do you ever watch or do you ever read Glenn Greenwald?
No, I haven't. What is his deal?
Well, he's a great journalist. But he published an article in it's like the Brazil Times. It was and it was republished over here in English yesterday.
I just wrote it down though, so go ahead. Huh?
Yeah, yesterday or today. Yeah, I mean, it's like I'm almost like hesitant to bring this up because I don't want to start a controversy. But I guess in America, unless you are over 50 and conservative, support for Israel has dramatically dropped. And they did a poll, is it a Gallup poll? And that was published in the Financial Times this month that shows that more Americans sympathize with Palestinians than Israel's for the first time since Gallup began tracking the sentiment. A recent internal Democratic Party report concluded that the Biden-Harris support for Israel's war in Gaza suppressed the youth vote and cost them the election. I thought that was very interesting because it's so controversial. It's so controversial if you just this whole topic. And Glenn's a respected journalist, and his whole position was he was trying in Brazil. Brazil has continued to be a big supporter of Israel and of America entering wars, and he was not just talking about that, but he was also talking about how it's very easy to be supportive of conflict and of wars when you have nothing to do with it. Brazil's not going to war with anybody.
Right, sure.
They're not showing up fighting for the little guy.
Yeah.
Right. Anywhere. And so, but the world sentiment is starting to shift a little bit, and I think also as like America is getting bolder and bolder, and we've got a guy in the White House that just like things just come out of his mouth, So I think, other people are starting to feel a little bit more confident about asking questions. Well, why do we do that? Well, why is our policy that way? Well, why are we sending that money that way? Well, why are those the bad guys? Why are those the good guys? Who are our friends? Who really are our enemies? Was that a good outcome? Is that the true story? Is that how history really happened? Like, there's just a lot of question marks over people's heads these days. And young people are bucking the system, right? I mean, we're seeing a lot of bad things that they do, right? The general consensus is that they're lazy and that they're recalcitrant and insubordinate, and a lot of them are trying to, and they're spending money on stupid degrees, right? But they're going back to church. They're valuing, relationship over things. And I don't know. There's some positive trends that are happening. So I hope that wherever we arrive, I think the goal is we should all feel confident and safe in asking questions and challenging beliefs and challenging well-established norms. That's just what we should always be doing that. And so
there's a reason the First Amendment's the First Amendment. If you cannot seek truth, if you cannot seek truth, then you can't find truth. And that's why you have freedom of speech. If you don't have freedom of speech, then none of the other stuff can happen.
Yeah.
Of course, you get the Second Amendment to make sure you get to keep the First Amendment. So there's a reason why those two are closely tied together. So yeah, I've got no problem. In fact, I think it's a great thing that we seek truth. In doing so, this is always a problem of the young, and I think it was Chesterton who said, before you tear that fence down, you might want to make sure that you know why it was there in the first place.
Yeah.
And so there's always that piece you have to be aware of, and this is why that's so important. An education that's steeped in history, and that's one of the things that's been taken away from them the last 30 or 40 years, because the educational system is like so horrendous. I mean, that so many of them can be flirting with the idea that communism might be a good thing, for example, in light of what literally just happened yesterday in terms of communism. This last generation, this last century, we saw what, I can't even remember the number anymore, 80 million people wiped out, 180 to 100 million people, more than that, because China took out 40 to 50 million of their own people in a 4-year time period. And that they don't know that stuff is a failure on the part of the boomer generation to transmit that knowledge, because they should know that stuff. I mean, the fact that they run around talking about Hitler and nobody knows anything about Stalin or Lenin or Mao. I mean, Hitler was a runner-up compared to those guys.
Oh, for sure. Oh, for sure. I mean, he was far distant, distant.
And nobody knows, or Tojo even. I mean, if you, and I encourage all of you, if you could, I want to say you can handle it. I think it's sometimes you have to look into evil so you can understand it and learn it. It feels nasty and yucky, and most good people don't want to do it because it feels so bad, but you have to know a little bit about it. That doesn't mean wallow in it, but it's like a detective. A detective's got to go look at some ugly stuff so he can solve the crimes, right? If he doesn't look at the ugly stuff, he or she can't be a great detective. And it's the same thing here. So I'd encourage you to Google some stuff on the rape of Nanking and then wrap your head around that. It is like so dark and so bleak that you could train troops to do that stuff. And they didn't naturally do it. They had to teach them that. I mean, one of the things was they used to put, they would put Chinese tie them to a tree and they'd make the new guys bayonet them, right? Until they got used to it. And they did that with women, children, grown men, old people, no matter, until they got used to it, right? I mean, you have to look at those stories to understand just how bleak and evil these people were, or what Lenin would do and Stalin would do to the political prisoners they took to Lubyanka, which is the prison underneath Red Square. They actually sloped the execution chamber so that it sloped, so that way all the blood would run downhill, right, and then go right. And they would just like shoot them all day long, right? They have all kinds of whiskey and vodka there because the mind is not conditioned to do that sort of thing. So these people have to be blind drunk to do that. I mean, it's just, but you have to know what people are capable of absent morality. You take away the moral code, which is what communism does, religion's the opiate of the people, right? You take that away, nature abhors a vacuum. This is what you get. And we don't tell people that stuff blatantly. Every discussion at bottom is a discussion around whether we should do this or whether we should do that. That's the province of religion. So when these people start trying to tell you religion can't be in the public square, that is an absolute lie. Religion is the public square. And too many of us have backed away from saying that. You can't have a conversation about anything unless it's about whether something's good or bad, right or wrong, better or worse. that's a moral discussion at all times, everywhere and everywhere.
Yeah.
It's and we just have to say it boldly and take the arrows that come. And young people, I think, can handle that. They're hungry for that. And the cool thing is, I think the trends are very good in terms of them. They're moving towards religiosity.
Yep.
So they'll save us from ourselves, but we got to help them
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we
and give
do.
them.
We have to make this world better. We have to make it more affordable, so
Yeah,
that they'll have babies.
yeah, yeah. Got to have lots of them. That's it. Oh man, I'm so bad.
I
Yeah.
love it. I would love to have oodles of grandchildren in 10
Oh,
years. Not
yeah.
today.
Well, you see, and see, this is the thing about that. It's like exercise, right? You don't benefit from it till later. And having kids is like that. The benefit comes downstream, right? Actually, the benefit is not your own kids, it's their kids. So
Yeah.
that takes a while, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm not there yet. All I know is that I was
Yeah,
talking to a friend, and I was telling her how old my son is. And she was like, "Oh my God, I can't believe he's that old. That happened so fast." And I was like,
yeah.
"No, it
Oh,
didn't. It happened one
yeah,
day at a time. And it was
yeah.
a long
What is that
day."
old saying?
But
The days are long, but the years are short.
yeah.
That is so incredibly true. And I just had to comment real quick. This is something Lori wrote here. You said you're almost 60. You know about that prison under Red Square? Yeah. I mean, what I should do at one of these, maybe next week, I'll come up with a list of things that you guys could look up on this kind of stuff. I had a college professor who was a Russian dissident who had escaped the Soviet Union. So this was in 1980. And this dude, man, he gave us. I learned so much about how communism works. It wasn't even funny. And then I had a history. This is the days when you could get good stuff in college, right? I had a history professor who was an expert on this stuff, right? And I took an advanced course. Mostly only history majors took these courses because I love history. I took the high level course anyway, and and all kinds of books on what actually happened in places like Lubyanka. That's the prison underneath Red Square. Tojo had a concentration camp that did the same things. Where they were experimenting on human beings while they're still alive. So he was doing this stuff in Tokyo at the same time as Dr. Mengele in Germany was doing his stuff
Oh,
over there, right? And so he was doing it the Chinese, and in Germany, of course, they were doing it the Jews and what do you call it, and Romanis, and stuff like that, right?
gypsies. Yeah.
Yeah, gypsies, the whole nine. So that's one of the reasons why people think that the reason why Japan surrendered was because of the atomic bomb. I don't know that that's quite true. This is that historical stuff. I think the reason they surrendered was the Soviet Union declared war on them right before the atomic bomb, and they were invading from the north. And they said, we'd rather surrender to the Americans than the Russians. And a lot of that happened, right? Just like the Germans on the Western Front. Well, if we're going to surrender, let's surrender to the Americans. Let's not surrender to the Russians because it's not going to go well, right? So these are like really interesting discussions to get into as you research them.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, I'd love to have those discussions. I love history. I just, I haven't spent enough time, learning about it and thinking about it recently, but it is one of my favorite subjects.
and one of the cool things now is right at your fingertips. When I was doing, you had to go to the library and go look it up and do the
Yeah.
decimal system and all that, right? Now you just push a button and you can look up pretty much anything. Or you can geek out at night and just put yourself to sleep watching a lecture or listening to a lecture on any of this stuff. And some of these guys are really good. This is the thing. Even the AI ones aren't bad. I mean, it's irritating that they're AI, but factually, some of them have been like, I gotta say, I'm impressed. Usually, if I figure out it's AI, I just turn it off because I don't want to encourage that stuff. But I've been pretty impressed with the AI. And I'm just listening. I'm not watching the video. I'm just
Well, and
listening.
it's just an AI voice that's reading a script, right? And they're
Right.
not making up the information. It's just they've got a script and they just have an AI voice reading it. So,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like, so the information is right there. You start going down these rabbit holes on it. And the thing is, because it's like King Solomon said in the book of Ecclesiastes, ain't nothing new under the sun.
Right. That's right.
Nothing new under the sun. It's all been tweaked. It's tweaked here, it's tweaked there. Heresy here, heresy there. Heresy in the second century, heresy in the 19th century. We find new ways to sin, but it's still sin. So,
That's right. That's right.
all right, my dear, it is like 7:02, and we don't want to abuse
What?
our good crowd's time. You guys are a wonderful audience. I love it every time. And I'm so glad y'all show up for us, right?
Thanks very much, everybody. It's been a bit of a hard week for me. A lot of things going on, and for Dawn as well. But this is one of the highlights. So I appreciate everybody being here and just giving me the opportunity to talk and complain and celebrate.
All that. All
All of
that.
it.
All right, gang. You guys take care. And until next week. Good night, everybody.
Bye.
All right. Are you there? I think I ended it. Oops. Hello. Hello. Still there?